Sup guys, this is the Staff Sarge, and I'm bringing you a new set of videos talking about some of the games that I play. Mainly sticking to the lesser known titles, so I do play like TF2, Black Ops, so on. You won't see them mentioned here because you already know everything about them. So, kick things off with, I'm going to talk about Mount&Blade. Now for those of you who watch Total Halibut, or Total Biscuit, or whatever he calls himself these days, you're probably accusing me of being a blatant thief since he's done a WTF on Mount&Blade. You're kinda right. I mean, I have no original ideas myself, so I'm just blatantly stealing from others. But this isn't going to be talking about one of them. This is going to be comparing the last two games released. So that's Warband, which was the first standalone expansion, added a whole bunch of stuff, made it a lot more freeform, a lot more fun to play, and Fire and Sword, which is the second and current standalone release, which put the game into 16th century Europe. It added a couple of things, but at the same time it kind of broke the game too, which I'll come to that later on when I get into details. So, jumping right into it, Mount&Blade. It's either a game you've never heard of before, or you've played it to death. For those of you who haven't heard of it, it's kind of like Total War, the RPG. It's set in 13th-ish century fictional Eurasia. You have your character, you run around taking jobs, fighting bandits. You recruit soldiers from villages or mercenaries from taverns, and the ultimate goal is whatever you want your ultimate goal to be honest. There's no real win criteria, so you can go for conquest, bring down all the opposing factions, you can be a trader, become rich and powerful, or you can just go around picking fights with everyone. Now, Warband added a whole bunch of things that I can't really give detail on, because I only played the demo of the original, and that was a good year ago. From memory, it had the ability to conquer your own territory and not just be a vassal for an existing power, amongst other things. Regardless, it's just the original with added stuff, and it's worth getting just on its own. If you want to play the original, just get Warband. Don't worry about the first one, seriously. So, on to gameplay. You start out on your own, after setting up your history, initial skills, when you get ambushed. You kill the ambushers, I can never get tenses right. You meet up with a trader who offers assistance, and then you're on your first quest. You recruit some militia, you rescue a kidnappee, you help clear out some undesirables from the city, and then that's it. And then you just let out on your own. Now, it's a good idea to go through this because it gives you some experience and money before you jump into the game proper. Plus, it gives you a very basic tutorial that isn't actually a tutorial for combat and party management. Now, that only covers the very, very basics, so the bulk of the game is unexplained by the game itself. Fortunately, there's a wiki for that, but still, kind of bad design when you need to rely on a wiki almost exclusively. Now, there's a couple of things you should look out for. First of all, guild masters in cities and elders in villages. They'll often have jobs that you can do for money. For villages, though, they generally don't give you money, but they might give you some supplies, or just a reputation boost, which is always handy. Guild Masters also let you start workshops to earn extra money. Every week, you need to pay off your standing forces. The size of your army dictates how much money you'll lose each week. If you have workshops, you'll earn money each week, which can offset some of it. Don't expect to make a lot of money, and don't expect them to pay themselves off for a fair while, but it's handy if you have those workshops set up, because then you don't have to worry about money as much. You can be running low on funds, the end of the week comes around, and you actually make a profit because of those workshops. Talking to lords, counts, and what have you is also important. If you often do good odd jobs for them, you'll not only get cash, but you can improve your relations with them. Or if you're feeling gutsy, you can just demand their surrender. They'll never surrender, of course, but if you manage to beat them down, you can loot their weapons, money, and pans, which is always a good thing. Most lords, though, they have very large armies, some of them passing the 100 mark, while you'll need to adventure long and hard to reach anywhere near that. Although your player character, by sole virtue of being a PC, can tilt the odds somewhat. Late in the game, you can become a force to be reckoned with on your own. Early on, though, it's a good idea to ally yourself with one nation, build up experience, money, and forces. They might even give you some territory of your own, which will earn money the same as workshops. So that's kind of Warband. But what about Fire and Sword? Well, first of all, it has guns. Muskets, pistolas, all muzzle-loaded flintlock designs. These are much, much more powerful and better at extreme range than bows and arrows, but they do have an insanely long reload time. Pistols, less so, but muskets, you're going to be there for a good couple of seconds. Now, the other changes are new terrain. Specifically, you're now in Eastern Europe, as in realistic Eastern Europe, with Poland, Russia, and Sweden as the big players. They also added some extra mechanics for sieges, which honestly were very much needed. Easier access to certain functions like guild masters. In Warband, you need to actually enter a city and walk to wherever he was located. Now, if you didn't know the layout of a city and you wouldn't first time going in, this could be annoying. You need to actually search around for him. Sometimes he'd be right in front of you, sometimes he'd be up and around the corner, and because the layout could take you a couple of minutes just to figure out where he is. In Fire and Sword, that's been changed, so there's now an actual go talk to the mayor option when you go into a city, so that's nice and streamlined. Now, personally, I honestly don't like Fire and Sword as much as Warband. It's not a bad game, but there's just a couple of things that do throw me off. Mainly because of the fact that it seems like instead of, going from Warband to Fire and Sword, it seems to have gone Mount&Blade to Fire and Sword. So, the extra things they added in Warband don't seem to be there anymore. The first thing is the character creation. Warband, you can actually set up your character, the history, what they were doing, whether they were male or female, and that would actually affect how they were created and how you could go about things. Fire and Sword doesn't do that. The second thing is recruiting soldiers. Now, Warband, you go to villages, you hire farmhands, and then you train them up to be hard-hitting mercenaries. Fire and Sword cuts right to the chase. If you want mercs, you just go to a merc camp and you hire them there. Now, to me personally, this takes away some of the fun, especially because of the amount of cash you need to build up a good-sized force. But on the bright side, you can upgrade your soldiers' gear, and it does remove the training aspect, which means that, like I said, while I prefer to keep it in there, it does definitely speed things along. The next thing is the decision to go with a realistic, or at least a semi-realistic, Europe instead of the fantastical version that they had in Warband. I like the idea of running around and burning historic cities to the ground, but it does mean you lose a little bit of the variety. I mean, Warband had French, Teutonic, Norse, Arabic XPs all running around, all wanting each other's heads, and that was good fun. In addition, because the decision to go for realistic Europe, the terrain is just bland. That's, honestly, it's all plains with a couple of rivers and a fair few forests. There's no real mountainous terrain. There's no mix-up in the types of terrain, really. So, I don't know, it takes it from being an interesting game to just being meh, just from that. Now, the thing that actually stopped me outright from playing this game, that I was playing it for a while, I was trying to get into it, and then eventually I just went, nope, table flip, and rage quit. And that was the firearms. The big thing that they added in here, the pistolas, the muskets, that's what turned me off. As said, they are insanely deadly. And because it still uses the same combat mechanics of Warband, of Mount&Blade, which is, you are the linchpin of your force. If you fall down, then your force is pretty much, going to be slaughtered. Because of that, it means that you can't really do much against the gun line. If you overexpose yourself, chances are you're going to die. If you try to get your force into position, you're going to have to expose yourself, which means you're going to die. If you try and even flanking them and getting them on a charge, chances are you're going to be running into a hail of lead and you're going to go down hard. Now, it's not impossible. I'm not saying that's impossible. It's not that the gameplay is completely broken. It takes a fair bit of trial and error, but by using the terrain, by using cover, and correct management of your forces, it is possible to actually, take on a musket gun line and survive. It's just really hard, and it's the kind of hard that I don't find enjoyable. It's not challenging, it's just, piss me right the hell off. Okay, so to summarize, I really, really like Warband. I'm still playing it, I play it a lot. I know a lot of other people on the internet love it as well. So I recommend that to just about everyone. Fire and Sword though, I mean, like I said, I don't consider it to be a bad game, just one that I didn't really enjoy. I've heard a lot of people on the internet complaining about it, like being fairly brutal to it. And like I said, my opinion is, it isn't that bad, but those few niggles just spoil it for me. So, closing, I'd say, get Warband, play it, enjoy it. And if you want to try Fire and Sword, if you really want to run around, realistic Europe with firearms and all that kind of thing, there is a demo flowing on the internet. For some reason it's not on Steam, or at least I couldn't find it on Steam, so I may just be blind. Anyway, so, in summary, the entire Mount&Blade series is very good. Warband, though, is the best of the lot, and that's the one that I recommend over the others. But again, if you do want Firearms, then Fire and Sword is an okay game in my book. And that's all I got. Staff Sarge out. Okay, this is embarrassing. You see, when I originally wrote up this review, I decided to base everything on what I had experienced when I first played Fire and Sword, which was a few months back, and then I stopped playing it. Well, I had to replay through recently. First of all, to get the footage, obviously, for this review. Secondly, just to make sure that I wasn't making stuff up. You know, it's a good idea to do a little bit of fact-checking, and it turns out I kind of was. I haven't dug through any patch notes or anything like that, but it does appear that in the updates for the game, you know, in the last few months or so, they seem to have fixed a couple of the issues that I had with it. First of all, you can actually hire guys from villages. Now, I'm not too sure what the restrictions are, because some villages I could and some I couldn't. But, you know, the Warband style of, you know, recruiting fodder and then train them up, that seems to be still in there. Or has been added in there, rather. What else? You can also pick a female character, so I was completely off by that. No other historic options, though. You can't pick your background or anything, so that still kind of sucks, but it's not as bad. But combat, no real changes there. The combat still feels like, you know, you got to use gun lines, otherwise you're screwed. Also, from replaying, I realized that it's not just because guns are so utterly deadly, it's also because generally your health stats are a little bit lower, and the armor is definitely not as good. To get okay quality armor compared to Warband, it costs a hell of a lot. So that's still an issue. So overall, Warband still gets my vote, but if you played Warband and you want something a little bit different, then yes, I can recommend Fire and Sword. It does mix things up nicely, like I said, the new siege options, the new terrain, even though it's a little bit boring, but it's not just everything, all the battlefields are on flat plains. There are hills and crests and that. It's just that the, you know, strategy map looks fairly plain. So yeah, post-patch Fire and Sword, it is holding my attention much better. I am enjoying them all, though not as much as Warband still. So yeah, I can recommend getting Fire and Sword. Staff Sarge out.